Ready to move to the next level in your product career? I'm Shobhit from Intentional Product Manager. Join me as we discuss ways to help you stand out in your job search and your career so you can have more impact and make more money. Welcome to the Intentional Product Manager podcast. So with me today is Phil Hornby. Phil is a seasoned product leader, coach, technologist with 20 years of experience. And I love his mission. It's to help product leaders think clearly, make strong decisions, and take powerful action for high impact outcomes. Phil has helped thousands across hundreds of companies, empowering teams to deliver exceptional results. And he's writing a book, which I think is a really brave thing to do. I've not yet managed to figure that out myself, but it's called It Depends. It's a handbook for making high impact product decisions in context. In today's episode, we'll cover product leadership, coaching, roadmaps, and Phil's hot takes on leadership and product management. So Phil, first of all, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you here.
Pleasure being here, Shobhit.
So let's get started with some quick questions. So one of my friends who I quote all the time, Bruce McCarthy, he called you an authority on the subject of product roadmaps. Great to see that. So tell me, what are some of the biggest mistakes you see product managers make in thinking about roadmaps?
Seeing it as a plan is probably the first thing. I think roadmaps are this central artifact to all of product work. They come into some criticism from some quarters. Like, I know Marty Kagan's famously not a big fan of them, although funnily enough, I've had him saying everyone uses them, they're necessary, they help get people aligned. So they can be quite a powerful tool, but they get treated as this commitment, this we are definitely doing this on these days, as opposed to this direction of travel, this artifact that's going to help us all understand the direction of travel and get aligned on it. We often put too much specificity in there, too much, we go too granular. There are different audiences of our roadmap ultimately. Like the CEO and the investors just don't need or care about the same level of detail as the engineers and the operations team. And they care about a different time horizon compared to the development team. And then there's the sales and customers who care about a different perspective as well. So one of the key things is they treat it as one artifact. And the reality is, yes, it's one data set, but it's probably 4 or 5 different views. They also treat it as something that is owned by one person, like it's the product managers. I'm a great believer that actually product is a team sport and the roadmap needs to be owned by the team. If the team isn't bought into it, forget about it.
I especially like the part you mentioned where there are different customers and you're trying to satisfy all of them with just one product, the end roadmap, and it's just not working.
I mean, one of my favorite examples there is I work with a CPTO at the moment. About a year ago, in fact, he came to me and said, the CEO's just said, I need a roadmap. I said, great. What does the CEO mean by a roadmap? Was my first question back to him. And he said, what do you mean? It's a roadmap. Now, bear in mind, this was a CTO who'd taken on the product hat. He was developing a roadmap, and it was a valuable and useful roadmap, but it was oriented towards the development and the operations teams. And I run workshops that are essentially a design sprint for your roadmap. And in there, I've collected through lightning demos hundreds of different visuals for what a roadmap looks like. And I find that's a really useful tool for having that conversation of what is a roadmap to you. So I gave the CPTO a Miro board with 100 different visuals on and said, just go and show him these and get him to say what it is he wants. After 4 or 5 of them they looked at where he said, well, that kind of gives me a bit of it, that gives me a little bit else of it. The CEO stopped and said, wait a second, I know exactly what I want. It's in the investor deck from last year. And he went and pulled the visual out and said, I just need an updated version of this. And it was what I now term a territory diagram. So I've got 14 different visual styles that I've distilled from that work. And one of them is like a box with another box that kind of extends up and right from it and another one that goes up and right from that again. And it kind of is showing the territory that we're gradually taking over, we're gradually expanding into with pretty high level details and initiatives on there. And that because that artifact was what the CEO needed to have a conversation with their investors.
You mentioned decision making, and you recently spoke at an event on this. You're writing a book on it. Talk about what are like some common anti-patterns that you see, or maybe even one mistake that you made personally in this arena, and what did you learn from it?
I mean, I guess I will wind back to one fundamental thing. Product people, the core of their job is making decisions. And in fact, Shane Parrish, in the book I mentioned earlier, there's a quote in there that just rang so true. The output or the worked product of knowledge workers, and product managers and knowledge workers, are decisions. And so making decisions and making them well is a key tool that we need to have in our toolbox. But here's the crux of it. No one's ever been taught how to make decisions. We just assume that they know how to make decisions because they happen to be alive. They haven't died, so they didn't make some really bad decisions, but there's probably some much better decisions that they could have made. And so there's some fundamentals of decision making, and there's some principles around decision making that many of us have heard. Things like disagree and commit. We can have the debate, we get through it, but ultimately we've got to commit to it and follow on. So when I've sort of thought about decision making, I ultimately came to there are three primary stages. There's getting to the decision, there's making the decision, and there's implementing the decision. In fact, so you mentioned Bruce earlier. He tells a story that resonates with me so much. He was working with a C-suite team a few years ago, and they agreed on 4 OKRs. So there was a decision, great. But the CEO walked out of the room, wrote all 4 on the whiteboard in front of his team, and then put a line through 2 of them and said, we're going to ignore those. We're going to pretend they don't exist. And that ultimately means that the decision that was really made was that there were only 2 OKRs. That was the implementation. If you don't follow through on the decision, if you don't disagree and then commit, then you've actually created a different decision. You've overridden the decision-making model that you chose to follow of agreeing in the room as a team. And so knowing how you're going to make it, what's the model we're using? Like there are generally 4 decision-making models that are identified by Bain, for example, one of which is directive. It's the hippo or the founder mode approach. Do as I say. Another one is democratic, like let's raise our hands. Who's going to vote for it? And then there's also consensus, where we try and get everybody on the same page. And frankly, in most cases, consensus is what a lot of teams aim for, but it's often the way to get suboptimal results because you knock all the hard pointy edges off. You knock the things that make it different and make it stand out. Whereas what's often an optimal model is what's called participative decision making, which means one person decides. The best qualified, most informed person decides, but they listen to everybody else. So that might be the product manager, it might be the designer, it might be the engineer, it might have to go up the tree to the CTO or the CPO, heck, even to the CEO. Knowing who can decide, and I tend to think of it as you have a zone of empowerment, what you're able to decide within, and a zone of leverage. Like you want to make the highest leverage decisions that you're empowered to make.
One of the best things over at Google was this idea that escalate fast and do inclusive escalation to get decisions made when you can't make it. So in a large organization, you'll have people with different objectives, different OKRs, and that's okay. But you go to the first common manager, let them decide, you both present your point of view, and then you move on. So like that participative decision.
I'm a big fan of if you are escalating, sometimes you need to delegate down with context. Other times you need to escalate up, but also recommend a course of action. Actually put yourself on the line and say, this is what I think should happen and why. Because too many people just say, here's the information, can you decide for me? And take ownership. And actually it has the effect, I generally find, of increasing your empowerment, because ultimately people start to trust you more to make bigger and bigger decisions.
Well, let's go and discuss a bit more about your story. Like, tell me more about your product management career and how did you end up running your own company and writing a book? What's behind all this?
So how did I get here? So the short version, it starts out as an engineer. I'm what I consider a full stack engineer, which basically means I can design hardware as well as write software. Or I could back in the day. And I worked as part of a team that were all like that. And my managing director, who hired me straight from university or college for the American audience, he was a product manager in the 80s. You know, people think product is this new thing. It's actually been around pretty much since the 1930s. It's not actually overly new. It's evolved and grown massively in the last 15 years, but it's been around a long time. And so he brought that product way of thinking. We were, as Marty would call them, empowered engineers. We were doing the product work, driving the product, but also building it. What some people talk about as product engineers these days. There are some companies taking that approach. But that gave me that foundation, and I worked my way through that organization, ended up on the senior leadership team, and then we got acquired. And when we got acquired, the job I was doing, basically my MD looked at me and said, they don't need anyone doing that post-acquisition. But what they do need, or what we need, is a product manager. You've got similar skills to me, so why don't you become our first product manager? 3 months later, the new global head of product in the building and said, can I have him? 3 months later, there was a major product problem that happened. A new version of our stack was launched. I happened to be in the room in Detroit with my boss at the time, and I was firefighting it to solve the problems and helped quite a lot. And by the end of the day, I owned the platform, which was, quite a meteoric rise. After a while, that team came to an end. Basically, we reorganized. So some people were downsized, that sort of thing. I went with my old team ultimately. But then I kind of followed through a few other companies. I've played around in many different roles. I've done product, I've done engineering, I've done training, I've done operations, I've done a bit of biz dev, I've been a consultant. There are lots of things in the middle there, got messy. Then I ended up leading product for an automotive technology company that does engine controllers and tires and all this sort of thing. But we were part of a company they'd acquired to digitize the automotive aftermarket, when your car goes and gets serviced and maintained, that sort of thing. And so I stayed there for a while, did some good work, but ultimately they changed as much as they wanted to by the time I left. And it was like, okay, I'm a natural change agent. I can't take them any further. It's time to move on. And so I stepped out and did my own thing, which is something I'd actually wanted to do for about 15 years at this point. It's like I'd been saying, I want my own business. So it was just one of those, the time is right moments. Stepped out, and I did mostly training for a while, and then ultimately coaching. And the book has come around because, well, if I'm quite honest, I realized I needed to find a focus. We always, as product people, tell people to focus. And then when you're a trainer and a consultant, you kind of go generalist. And I realized I needed to take my own advice. And the book was about choosing a focus, and that being decision-making, because of my belief that it's the central part of great product work.
In this journey, so, you mentioned you were looking to start something for 15 years. You then decided, how did you hone in on, this is exactly what I want to be doing as running my company?
I wish I could claim that it was really well thought out and this sort of thing. It goes back to really one simple thing. So I'd always thought of myself as having almost 3 pillars to my skill set: training, products, and technology. And in the past, I'd been a technology trainer at one point. And then the opportunity came up to be a product trainer. And so it just created an opportunity. I actually look at my life and think, I'm probably in Act 2. Every story has 3 acts. Act 1 was doing the product work. Act 2 is helping people be great at doing the product work. And maybe Act 3 is a founder, creating something from scratch. That's where I think I will ultimately go, because I still feel that urge to build and create products.
Talking a bit more about, since we are on the topic of your business, as part of it, you're coaching a lot of product leaders, especially for, people who right at that cusp are starting to get into more leadership roles, either more strategy or even running teams of PMs. I want to paint the road ahead, or help them understand the road ahead. So what are some of the common struggles of product managers stepping into leadership roles?
The first one is no different than anybody stepping into leadership. It's choosing to lead. If I reflect back on my own career, my first leadership role, I wasn't choosing to lead. I was choosing to get the status and get the salary. It was as simple as that. And I wasn't a very good leader. I enjoyed doing the work and I wanted the money and the status. I didn't really understand what it meant. But then over time I learned, and I worked out that actually my job was to make the space, the environment, the culture for the team to be successful instead of doing it myself. I was no longer the person delivering, they were the people delivering. And my job was to make it so they could. My job was to get their problems out of the way, was to help them when they got stuck, to be their coach. In fact, that's really the natural progression I went on. As a leader, I had been a coaching style manager. And so when I transitioned into or out of the corporate role, coaching people was just what I did. It's how I work, how I'd always worked. So it was a natural kind of my approach to leading, which was quite useful, to say the least. What have they got ahead? They've got to make that choice to lead, I think. They're going to find that it's not always easy, like having hard conversations. Like when you're part of the team, you can be nice. What you probably need to do as a leader is be kind. And sometimes being kind means saying the hard things, the hard truths, the things that are not easy to hear in the moment, but that help them grow and find the opportunity to become better.
This is already a real worthy moment, like the difference between being kind and being nice. Like, tell me more about that. Well, what is the actual difference?
I mean, this is something that I'm stealing it from an old client. I'll be honest with that. It's like it was one of their values and it just resonated so much with me. So being nice is where you say something that makes people feel happy, if it makes them feel good about themselves, but doesn't actually help them usually in the moment. Whereas being kind is looking to the long term. Now, sometimes in the moment, the right thing is to be nice. It's like they are not in the right headspace to have the kindness. But if you want to help them long term and help them grow, you've got to find the time to bring that candor to them. And I avoid the word honesty, for example, as well here. Like I think it was in Radical Candor that I read this. Like honesty carries this perception of there is one truth. Candor is about me giving you my truth, my perception of how I think what you need and how I can help you. It's down to you on how you take it and how you embrace it or don't. Like all I can do is help in the best way I can.
I'm in the process of crystallizing some of the values of my own company, and this just like communicated one of the things I've been trying to communicate for a while, which is like for our clients, it's important for them to understand the real truth of where they are and where they need to go, for you to be direct with them. And being nice in the moment detracts from that, or having the need to be nice actually detracts from them. So I thought it was really powerful the way you stated that. I'm
going to hold my hands up. I still make this mistake today. I've done it with a client recently where I probably should have given them much more direct candor, and I chose not to after a reaction from a previous meeting where they wanted something a little softer, and so I was a little softer later when actually it was probably more critical that I gave them the more candid answer.
Let's look at the other side of things. So like tell us more about some of the most successful product leaders you worked with, and maybe like let's dig into what made them successful.
The most successful product leaders I work with are the ones that know they don't know everything. And I mean, I'm not saying I'm turning up and know everything. It's actually knowing that we need to have a conversation. We're going to go around a few times often. We're trying to find that clarity of where can we do things better? How can we approach something? Not that we can get the perfect answer. There's no such thing as a perfect answer. There's no such thing as the perfect outcomes, but knowing that if we spend some time sparring and kicking an idea from 5 different directions, we're probably going to find an insight about it. But then there's going to be some follow-up activities as well, where they go in and work with their team and have those conversations. Or sometimes the conclusion is, actually, you as the leader shouldn't be the one caring about this or getting into this detail. Go and give it to your team to kick around. They need to find the answer and bring it back to you. And so there's an element there of the right leveling of the decision. Who should be dealing with that particular element? The self-awareness there. Knowing when to get directive is a great example. sometimes you just have to do it. And I know it gets a lot of bad press. The leader turning up and saying, JDI, this particular thing. Sometimes there's a reason that they can't share all the detail with their team. One of my favorite examples there is you get asked to integrate a particular API. Let's imagine that feels like a very feature level demand. Why is the CPO getting involved there? I always like to ask myself, if I'm on the receiving end of that, of what don't I know? Or what can't I know? And an example that I've seen of that play out is there was an acquisition taking place. And that API was critical to that acquisition. But they couldn't tell the team that. They just had to give a directive, we need to integrate this API. And I just need you to do it. I need you to disagree, but commit to doing this because it's important for our business. And I can't give you all the details.
Sometimes it's just time. It's time to decide and move forward.
Yeah, I mean, just decisiveness. Sometimes, I mean, I hate the too overuse of kind of wartime analogies, but in wartime, directive decision-making is often a useful tool because it's about speed of decision-making. Decision velocity becomes important. And so just saying, this is something we're going to move on quickly, let's do it. And knowing that there's probably going to be some friction in the team, people are going to be a little unhappy. In fact, that's the best advice there, though. Just voice that, say, I know I'm doing the thing that you don't want me to do. I know that this isn't how the best practice says I should do it. There's a reason we just need to do this. We need to do it for time. Let's be as transparent as we can, but let's just move forwards.
Let's talk more about your work with product leaders. Like, what sort of approaches do you take in your work to help coach them and get them to the next level?
So I have to use the classic phrase. It goes back to the book of It Depends. In fact, I was chatting to someone who I just wrapped up a coaching engagement with the other day. And his feedback to me was, I got so much value out of it because instead of turning up with a fixed program of this is what we're going to do, which frankly a lot of coaches do, it was like, I turned up ready to talk about his agenda and about what he cared about or what mattered. Now, sometimes I came in prepared to talk about a particular subject because we planned it. Other times it was different. Like there was an example of another product leader I worked with a few years ago. I turned up, the plan was to talk about value propositions, to kind of think about how they were going to pitch a different set of tiers of their product. Great, ready for the conversation, mirror board prepped, everything ready to go as we dived into that session. And she arrived on the call and said, I know we're supposed to talk about value propositions, but we've just had an acquisition offer. I need to figure out how to work through that. It's like, cool, yeah, okay, put that down. Let's talk about it. I've been acquired a few times. I've got an idea where we go through, how we think about this. A similar one, 3 months into coaching someone who was 3 months into the job as well. They were the head of products, most senior product person in the organization. And 3 months in, they were told, right, you now own P&L for the whole product. And I'm sure you know this, Shobhit. Back in the past, that was quite normal for product people to have. Now, not so much. And so there's a whole generation of product leaders that have never had to care about the commerciality of a product. And so don't know where to start. So she kind of came on the call. It's like, I don't know where to start. What do we do? Like, okay, put down the conversation we were going to have. Let's talk about P&L. Let's talk about where you are, what your current understanding is, what you've actually been asked to own, because that, I mean, it can be quite variable what they really mean when you've got P&L. Often it really comes down to, is it a viable business?
From what I'm getting is like, it's the ability to adapt to the situation and the fact that you've worked with all these different leaders and you have the tools that's required to help them get through the situation. But in the moment, it's about what's the most important thing right now.
There are definitely some people where we have more of a longer term thread going through the sessions. There are other people where it's much more by the session. The point is it's based on their agenda. It's what are their needs. I see myself as their sparring partner, their thought partner. Like my whole coaching model is set up as a subscription. So it's not you're paying for an hour with me here and an hour with me there. You're paying for me to be available to help you throughout the month, and therefore to be that sparring partner, to get into your context and understand it, and then be able to have conversations about it. And that's across a various range of kind of industries, from additive manufacturing to cryptocurrency to fintech to insurance tech to marine ERPs as one example as well. And so one of my, I guess, a few of my kind of core skills are: one, getting into context quickly; two, having a set of tools and techniques and ways of approaching things. Like, this is not a virtual background. It's a subtle thing. Like, I've read them all, I understand them, and one of my core skills is being able to apply them with a great degree of skill very quickly, and think, right, well, this tool, this approach could work in this context, because there's 100 different ways of doing strategy. Which one's going to work in this context? That's what I'm bringing. And then it's, pure exec coaching is a clean language, just asking questions. You don't hire an experienced product leader to be your coach and not bring product experience. So I bring tools, techniques. Maybe it's a story that accelerates the understanding, so then we can really have the deep conversation about their context.
Let's talk about companies. So we talked about you coaching product leaders. I know everybody's different, but like, if you were to put certain themes on in this environment, today's market, these are like common struggles of companies that they come to you with. What would those be?
So it's usually the individual that comes to me over the company, and it's really about them wanting to be their best. It sounds like a cliche, but some people view coaching as being about helping someone when they're failing. I view it as being, it's about leveling up the game. Like, you don't go to, look at an NFL team. There's like 10 coaches around there to help the players that are already the best in the world be even better. And that's what coach is about. Like, there's the famous $1 trillion coach, Bill Campbell, God rest his soul, who was in Silicon Valley, who coached the Steve Jobs, the Eric Schmidts, and this sort of the world. It's that principle of, like, I can help people just be better at what they're doing. I'm not saying they're not great already or not good already. It's about taking them to that next level, because they get that extra sparring partner, that extra clarity.
Got it. And if you reflect back, when you think of the lessons you've learned working with them, like, what are some of the more counterintuitive ones?
So the most counterintuitive one to me is a team can have what appears to be really well-structured strategy, really well-structured objectives, and still be going completely the wrong direction. It looks like they've got this really clear and well-articulated, and it's just not working. And sometimes that's because of the market conditions. They've just kind of dreamed something up and think it's going to work. Sometimes it's just because they're getting in their own way. Like, they've created a plan and then they're not actually executing against it. They're all trying to go different directions, even though in theory they've got clarity. And then you see the other teams that have what appears to be no strategy, nothing articulated in any way other than in someone's head. And yet they're all plowing ahead in the same direction, making great progress. It's like, I still can't kind of rationalize how you can get to the point where it looks well articulated and not be on the same page, and you can have the other direction. Now, those are the extremes. Mostly the ones who don't have it well articulated are the ones who are going or are not doing well, and mostly the ones who have it well articulated are going well. But you do get those complete paradoxes.
It's not like you're trying to find this magical strategy. It's once you do, are you moving and everyone gets it, and are you moving in the same direction quickly towards it?
I mean, I think there's a lot of often sabotage almost within organizations. People just choosing, I guess it comes back all the way, if we go back to decision making, it comes back to the implementation. Are we actually following through, taking action in an aligned way that drives those outcomes?
Let's spend the last part of this discussion on one of the common themes here, which is product management careers. And nowadays, whenever I say product management career, somebody else says AI. But let's combine the factors. There's been like a hiring boom, then after that, a slowdown in the market, and like AI coming in, like what changes have you seen in product management careers, if any?
Yeah, let's wind back even a long way. So if we go back when I started product, it was very much a business role. Like you worked with development, but product development were our peers that we worked with and partnered with to create that value. With the advent of agile methodologies, with the advent of lean startup methodologies, product management's got closer and closer to the development team. And I actually think we've created a whole new tier of product managers. Like, what is a product management now? What is a product manager now is way more junior than an IC product manager was 15 years ago, because they work directly with the team. And what I did as just an IC is more what a head of director of does these days. So that's kind of a general evolution, and that took them more into the technology and more away from the business. And then the end of the zero interest kind of world happened, and all of a sudden we have to care about not just growth, not just these wonderful kind of metrics of, oh, we've increased user engagement, etc. We have to actually make some money. We have to care about the profitability. And for me, I always did. Product managers always should have. When I hear product managers, or I guess last year had product managers often saying, I'm struggling to justify my role. I look at them in strangely, it's like, talk to them about the business impact you're having. You should be able to articulate that. And I think the Airbnb move a couple of years, last year, or was it even longer ago now, was the start of the swing back to that business side. Like when they talked about what they turned product managers into, putting them inside product marketing and putting them closer to the business, exactly how they described them. It was like, so what you're saying is they're doing product management? What have they been doing until now? So I think we've seen the pendulum go from overly businessy to a nice blend to too technical, and we're on the swing back to being somewhere in the middle. That's what I hope. Now we've got a larger number of product managers, and I think that's a benefit, because I think that more tactical work of really understanding our customers, getting really deep and doing discovery has a lot of value. But it takes more people to do that. And the interesting thing is you then mentioned AI. Well, you can start thinking about what's the scenarios that could happen with AI. And one of those scenarios people talk about is we won't need product managers anymore. We can throw them all away. The engineers will have all the insights and just do it. And we'll need even less engineers to do it. I have a contrarian perspective on this. The productivity of engineers is going up. They can deliver more. Great. The productivity of product managers is also going to go up around, in particular, discovery, because we're going to be able to synthesize more data. But I don't think it's going to go up at the same rate as engineers. And so that then leads me to think, well, if I can do the same amount of work with less engineers, but I've got the financial resources for having more engineers, I can still use those other engineers to create more value. And if I'm going to create more value, I need more product managers figuring out how to create that value, and probably more designers as well. But so that actually maybe changes the ratios. So maybe we're on only 2 engineers to a product manager instead of the 6 or so now. So maybe it actually drives up the number of product managers, not down or not away. It's a plausible scenario. Like we can't predict exactly, but that's kind of a potential scenario that we could find ourselves in, where we need more, not less. And we're working with a smaller group, but they're just being more productive. And I don't know about you, but when it comes to simple economics, if I can spend the same amount but create more value and therefore get paid more as a business, that's what I'm going to do, because it's a multiplier. Whereas I can spend less and just create the same value. Well, I'm not getting the same multiplier anymore. So why wouldn't I spend more and create more value and get more return?
I love the contrarian view, which is, hey, like what you did here was like really think through the entire effects of the AI, and not just like what comes to mind driven by fear, which is, oh, AI could do a lot of work, so maybe my job is going to go away.
So I go back to an IBM quote from the 70s. And that quote, paraphrasing because I would never get it perfect, is something like, a computer can never be held responsible for something. Therefore, management decisions should be made by a human.
Right.
And in the near future, that's the world we're in. So AI is going to help me and it's going to make me so much more productive and so much more effective. But ultimately, the decision lands with me.
To bring this home, like what would be your advice be for product managers now in this new world, in this new job market?
So in the job market, I mean, recognize that it is still hard. It seems to be slowly picking up. No matter where you land on the political spectrum, last year, 50% of the world's governments or the world's population were at the polls. So there was a whole ton of uncertainty. We're now past that uncertainty. We're now in the point where there are policies that some people love, some people hate, but we have policies. We can start making decisions. And that to me is the key thing. Business doesn't do well in regulatory and government uncertainty. It likes to know what that environment's going to be like so that people can make decisions and move forwards. And I think, with the US election being the one that everyone was holding their breath for to see where it went, November was the key date in the year. And now we see things moving. And some industries are going super fast. Others are now going slower because the environment we're finding ourselves in, the sorts of policies in the US and other parts of the world, help some and hurt others. That's the nature of governmental change. But at least we can start to plan and make decisions and start executing again.
Phil, on that awesome note, thank you so much for doing the podcast, for sharing your wonderful insights with all the listeners that are going to listen to this.
Absolute pleasure, Shobhit. I've loved having a chat with you.
Hey, be sure to check out our website at intentionalproductmanager.com to see how you can level up in your career.